Hello. Thank you all for joining me here today. I'll begin with Bill 1, and then I'll get into the discussion of the report on Shawn Rehn, and we'll take your questions at the end. Yesterday, I was proud to stand before my colleagues in the Legislative Assembly and introduce Bill 1, an act to renew democracy, which will ban unions and corporations from making political contributions in this province. The bill is about renewing democracy in our province. Careful consideration was taken when it came to deciding which piece of legislation should become Bill 1. This government is here because individuals came together to vote to effect change. And so, we wanted our first act to give more democratic power back to Albertans, so their interests will always come first. Ensuring Albertans can continue to fully exercise their democratic rights is something that's very important and close to the hearts of the Premier and this government. Once the legislation is in place, Albertans can be assured that this province's political parties are accountable directly to them instead of to whomever has the deepest pockets. With this bill, only residents of Alberta will be allowed to make political donations to political parties, constituency associations, candidates for election and senatorial election, and leadership contestants. If enacted, it will be effective as of June 15th. This date has implications for candidates who ran in the May 5th general election. Implications that show we are serious about making political parties of all stripes accountable to Albertans. This means that, as of yesterday, June 15th, candidates will no longer be able to accept union and corporate donations to eliminate deficits left over from the recent election. It prevents political parties from rushing to fundraise before a deadline. We want to be sure that all political parties' financing during the term of this legislature complies with these new rules. If these legislative changes were not done in isolation, prior to and during the general election, Albertans told us that political donations needed to be changed, and we have consulted with the Chief Electoral Officer. Some may argue that these amendments do not go far enough, and to that I say, on behalf of this Premier and this government, we agree. I want to assure Albertans that Bill 1 is the beginning of our government's work to renew democracy in our province. As announced yesterday, together with the official opposition, we have proposed a special legislative committee. This committee will examine other changes that are needed in order to reform the electoral process. And along with electoral reform, the committee will be focusing on important aspects of transparency and accountability, such as whistleblowing and conflicts of interests. Albertans deserve a political system they can trust. So I'll now move on to the report on the involvement of the Alberta Crown Prosecution Services with Shawn Rehn. This report was released today and includes commentary on the bail process and makes several recommendations. In January, Shawn Rehn shot 2 RCMP members in St. Albert. Auxiliary Constable Derek Bond was injured, and Constable David Wynn lost his life. Mr. Rehn had an extensive criminal record and outstanding warrants. Understandably, questions were raised about why, in the bail hearing leading up to the shooting, a police officer attended the hearing without a Crown prosecutor in front of a Justice of the Peace. The safety of our communities and the safety of our law enforcement, who protect us from those who would do us harm, is crucial. We are moving forward immediately to implement the recommendations in this report. We need to know if an improved bail process can respect people's rights, but at the same time better protect our communities and the police. Although the recent shooting death of Constable Daniel Woodall was not connected to the bail process, it reminds us of the enormous sacrifice that our police officers make in ensuring that our communities remain safe. The comprehensive review of the bail process is intended to assist them in that effort. The individual who will lead this review will be announced soon. The expectation is that the review will be completed and I will receive recommendations by the end of this year. Both of today's announcements will transform Alberta for the better. The bail hearing review will identify important improvements needed to help transform the justice system. Bill 1 is a real change that Albertans have asked for. This brings equity and fairness to election financing and is a new direction for democracy in this province. I'll now be happy to take your questions. I have with me a technical expert on Bill 1.
Minister, you probably realize that the PCs have been racing around trying to cover their roughly $1.7 million debt. A lot of their riding associations have pledges from corporate donors that they haven't collected yet. In fact, they're just in the process of sending out invoices. Does this for sure cut off receipt of any money, even if you have a written pledge from several months ago? Because there's a 90-day period under the old law under which you can collect money raised under the terms of election financing. So will this cut off collecting formal pledges?
That's an interesting question.
Okay, we might have to get back to you on that in terms of the deadline
Why
and the
do it so
old law.
quickly, Minister? Why not have a bit of a run-in period, a couple of months to allow the parties to adapt to these changes?
The intention of bringing the change in on June 15th is that this is a change that was asked for by Albertans. It's a change that's intended to sort of tilt the playing field back in favor of Albertans. And we wanted to make sure that it took effect immediately to ensure that there wasn't a rush to collect donations.
Minister, we heard from another party leader yesterday that they would be looking closely at legislation for opportunities to encourage donations. I don't really know how to phrase it. I don't want to use the word circumvent the law, but to encourage donations within the confines of the law from the unions and corporations that you're seeking to outlaw. Do you anticipate that there will be a possibility for that under the new law?
I think the bill itself is very straightforward. It bans unions and corporations from making donations. There are already provisions in the Act that prevent people from making donations on behalf of others. So going forward, I think the bill is straightforward and it does what it says it's going to do.
Could you react or give us your reaction to a PC interim leader McIver's statement yesterday that it will be less transparent and corporations will run around trying to find ways to donate anyway, and that the new system in fact will make it harder to find out who donors are?
I don't think it will make it more difficult to determine who donors are. Donors are still going to be required to declare when they're donating. This will ban corporations and unions from donating directly, and in terms of people giving money to other people, I mean, those provisions already were in the Act to prevent that from happening.
Are you aware of what Mr. McIver said yesterday?
Yes, I am.
Can you react a little more directly to what he said, that David Swan, where you're standing, called it nonsense? Do you agree?
Well, I mean, again, the only thing I can say is I think the bill is straightforward. I think it does exactly what it sets out to do. It bans union and corporate donations. This bill is intended to shift the playing field, but not in favor of any political party. It's intended to shift it in favor of Albertans so that political candidates and political parties are directly responsible to the citizens of Alberta rather than whoever has the deepest pockets.
One of the main concerns from the NDP in opposition was Daryl Cates basically stacking a donation using 17 donors to bring in one check for $430,000 for the PCs in the last election. Does this bill address that? Will you be addressing that at some point to prevent that?
Sorry, could you, so the issue is gathering up a bunch of donations and putting them all in as one.
And the concern was that there seemed to be no onus on the parties to make sure that that there were actually individual donations and that donors were following the rules.
So the Act itself already contains some provisions that deal with donors who aren't following the rules. This Amendment Act deals only with banning union and corporate donations. In terms of other electoral reform, which we think is very important, we are setting up a committee to sort of go forward and study the more technical details to bring in future reform.
There's still a lot of room for very wealthy people to donate up to $30,000 during an election campaign, or $15,000 in a standard year. It's kind of surprising you didn't change that. I wonder why you didn't, and when do you plan to have that changed by? Because I think you do plan to lower it, don't you?
Well, that is a change that will go to the committee, so they'll study it and what the effects of that are, and they'll make recommendations, and then going forward, we'll introduce more legislation. At this point, we're we're fulfilling a campaign promise, and a campaign promise that we think is really important to democracy in Alberta, to make sure that we're accountable to the people who elected
And
us.
is there a plan to extend it? Question on the bail, please. With the process and the review underway, are there any changes being made in the meantime, specifically in terms of police officers not conducting bail hearings at the level that they're at now? Because I understand Alberta is the only province where police officers conduct hearings as frequently as they do now.
So in terms of the bail process, we're going to conduct the review and decide who should be doing bail hearings and under what circumstances, but those recommendations will be coming back. In the interim, the report does make some recommendations in terms of reviewing communication of information and reviewing training and education surrounding prosecuting breach offenses, as well as dealing with bail directly.
So will police officers continue to speak for the Crown at bail hearings?
The system will stay in place as it is until such time as that review is completed and makes its recommendations.
Do you think the system's broken? Like, do you think this needs to be changed?
I think that there are a lot of people who are working very, very hard to make sure that they protect the interests of police officers and Albertans, and I think that they're doing a good job of that, but this is a crucial system. This is a system that ensures both the rights of those who sort of face the state in terms of a prosecution, and also ensures the safety of our communities and of our police officers. So I think it's important to review it to determine if there's anything we can do to make it better.
Back to Bill 1, is there a plan, or what are your thoughts on extending the ban to municipalities, school boards, for example? What are your thoughts on that?
That will all go into the review and the recommendations that sort of come out of the committee that will be examining it.
Joan has something to add to that question?
They're already prohibited.
Oh.
So they're on the list of prohibited. There's a whole long list in legislation of people who are prohibited. And this
And that's
bill,
included in amendments?
it's already in the act.
No, I
You're
think
talking
the
about-
question
we're
is
talking
donations to, for
Municipal
municipal and school board elections rather than
Oh,
from.
okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, misunderstood.
In the same way that it is now, but I hear what you're saying, it's a review, but what are your thoughts on extending it?
Well, I think my thoughts are that I'll probably wait to see what the more comprehensive review looks like. These are some pretty technical amendments, so.
Minister, two questions, one on Bill 1 and one on the report. The first one is, will the report in the Rehn case be made public when you receive it?
The report has been made public.
Oh, sorry, you said you were gonna get recommendations at the end of the year. Will those
Oh.
be made public?
That, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, that will also be
And,
made public.
Second question has escaped me.
We're gonna take one more question from the floor and then we're gonna go to the phone.
I'm wondering about the political contributions in terms of what ramifications will there be if someone does contravene the new ban on corporate and union donations?
So there are provisions in the new legislation that will force them to give back, so it'll force the political entity that's received the contribution to give it back. In addition, the chief electoral officer can also recommend prosecution. If prosecution proceeds, fines up to $10,000 can be imposed.
And I'm wondering about the reaction in terms of what Mr. McIver said yesterday. What did you think when you heard him say that it was a naked attempt to skew the, I guess, political scene to the governing party? What was your reaction to that?
I don't think it's an attempt to skew in favor of any particular party. I think it's an attempt to skew in favor of ordinary Albertans so that they are the ones that have the loudest voice in our election financing.
Okay, operator, we're gonna take your question now from the phone. Can you please state your name and outlet?
Your first question comes to the line of Rick Bell. Go ahead, your line is open.
One, people on the phone line didn't hear the answer to, I believe it was Don Braid's question about what happens to parties that have written pledges of contributions, but they haven't actually given the money yet. And number two, as far as the PCs go, how do you feel about the fact that there's actually a political party opposing the banning of corporate and union donations? That there's actually a party that will stand up and vote against this particular bill. So if you could answer the two, I'd appreciate it.
Well, to answer the second question first, I suppose, I mean, we do have the official opposition who has publicly stated sort of support for this particular bill. I mean, I guess that's their choice, that's the political process, if they want to disagree with the bill. I think that the people of Alberta will be thrilled with the bill, and that's my main concern.
Let's get back to number one.
With respect to number one, we're going to have to get back to you on that specific issue.
And do we have another question on the phone?
Yes, your next question comes in line of Edmonton. Your line's open.
The rent review here, are you looking to have some sort of, I know you haven't said who, some sort of outside player here? I'm reading the review of prosecutors, and it doesn't seem to find any fault with anything the Crown Prosecutor Service did. And I'm wondering if you need to be able to find fault, because there may be fault.
We might just get you to repeat that question. You're cutting out a little bit there.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just wondering if you're looking for the review on the Shawn Rehn case to have someone from the outside take a look at this. I'm reading the report that's been filed, and it doesn't seem to find any fault with what the Crown Prosecutor's Service did, and I'm wondering if you might need an outside perspective.
I don't think the report finds fault, but it's always worth looking into things to see if we can make them better. We are considering a number of candidates right now, but that decision hasn't been made yet.
Is it an internal review or an external review? I think that's what he said. Is it going to be somebody from inside the prosecutor's office investigating the prosecutor's office, or are you going to bring in somebody from another province?
Our intention is to bring in someone from outside.
Okay, that's it. Thanks, guys, for coming. Appreciate it.
Can I get my question?
I also
Since I
did
remembered
not get a
it.
question at all today. Can I ask you, Shawn Rehn had an extensive history as a youth offender too. How much is this going to look at that sort of bail history there when youth charges are made?
Well, I think the review that we're going to be doing is going to concentrate specifically on how bail hearings are conducted and how information travels within the system to ensure that the best information is in front of the person conducting the review and whether the right person is conducting the review. In terms of youth records, there are other constitutional considerations that would need to go into that, and I think that that's a much bigger discussion that's outside the scope of this particular review. I mean, in this specific case, the offender had a more than sufficient criminal record as an adult.
Thanks, guys.
Can I just because I forgot my question already.
One more and then we're going. I'm already late.
Your changes to Bill 1 are going to withdraw hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars from electoral politics in Alberta, right? Not just from the Tories, but from your own party and from others as well. What impact do you expect that to have on elections in Alberta? We're going to see parties with much less money in the bank when we go into an election.
Good.
Well, I think that the impact that it will have will be extremely positive. I think that will be the impact will be that people need to campaign on ideas and values and their commitment to the citizens of Alberta, and I think that's a great thing.
Thank you.